Hello, I am Ryan from The Way of the Leaf, and we welcome you to our show, WoT You Feeling. I want to start with a sincere thank you all for tuning in and supporting our little show. This is episode 3. This show is designed to be a thoughtful and engaging exploration into the mental and emotional health aspects of the world that Robert Jordan built in The Wheel of Time. We're hoping to create a free-flowing discussion about mental health, the role of society, and how these can be seen through a lens of empathy and support. Joining us, as always, are Miki, and unfortunately, our co-host Christine is not able to make it this evening, but she is in chat, so let's all say hi to Christine. Our guest host for this show is Anna of the Grey Aja. Welcome, Anna.
The Master of the Deck.
What did I? Oh no! I'm just reading blindly from a script. My gosh, it's Kayla from Master of the Deck, and that is a blow it. Sorry.
Scrap the show.
Blow it number 1. Yeah, she's like exit.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
That's right. Exactly.
Basic.
I mean,
That's
look,
the
that's
motto.
what we're here for.
A different redhead. Thanks, Christine.
You know what? I always, because I haven't had a natural hair color since I was like 13. I never really think of myself as any particular kind of, head.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my hair has kind of been red for the last like 5 or 6 months.
Is it rude to ask?
It's not an inaccurate statement.
Awesome.
What my natural hair color is?
Yes,
I don't know.
Yes.
You know how your hair changes color as you know throughout your life. As a child, it was very blonde.
Yeah.
But as I went into 12, 13 years old, it got a little bit darker, and then I dyed it black. So who the fuck knows what my natural hair color is? Anyway,
it's been uphill ever since.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Oh, we're happy you made it. Thank you for being our host for this show. And we are going to jump into a discussion about the social dynamics within Tar Valon, not Tar Valon, as I accidentally put. It is now fixed in the title, so thank you for that. Yes, social dynamics of Tar Valon. It is rich and ripe for discussion, and there's a lot of current events that we could possibly talk about in relation to what's happening in the books also. So it's going to be a great show, everyone. If you could like and subscribe, tweet this out, let everyone know this is happening. We'd love to have as many people watching as possible. Again, we're trying to increase like an empathetic world, a softer world if we can, and this is just our little, it's our play.
Our contribution.
It's our contribution.
Exactly.
It's our play. Yeah. We're putting this out for that reason alone. So, yeah, guys, how are we all doing?
I'm doing great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm excited. I think I'm excited in the way that most of the fan base is excited. Although I will say I'm a little more excited because I did score some passes for a premiere tomorrow. So I think that there's a lot of us that are feeling pretty excited and maybe have some anticipatory nerves for this week as well.
Yeah, I'm vacillating between being like extremely proud of our friends and fellows that are in London for the premiere and outrageously jealous. I saw a picture of Nameless at a pub with Rob from Malkier Talks, and I was like, you bastard, you get to hang out with Rob and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole flesh friends aspect to
In
it.
a pub, even.
Right, in a pub. In a
pub where you wanted me to be with
right?
Rob.
Right, exactly. So, not even obviously it's pretty cool that they get to meet the cast and interview people on the red carpet and be at the premiere itself. But, they also get to see each other and hang out with each other all in that one space. It's like a little vacation almost. So, I am really proud of everybody that's there though. So that's the primary feeling here. Jealousy comes second.
Yeah, maybe they'll come back to the States with some Rob honey cakes.
Something like that.
All right.
I will say before
yeah,
we get
go on,
started,
yeah.
I just want to say this is going to be on record. I had my Wheel of Time tattoo finished yesterday, so I got it before the show came out. All right, I was here first.
OG Wheel of Time.
There we go. Exactly. I wasn't hopping on a bandwagon. Needed to be finished before November 19th, and I made it.
All right, so did you just find a guy in the corner? I mean, we all could get that prison tattoo. I mean,
no. If anybody follows me on Twitter, you can see a picture of it. I'm at Pan Malzahn. But no, I got the line work done about a month ago, and then November 13th just happened to be like, all right, you want to book the second time? And I was like, fuck yeah, let's go. So I did.
Beautiful.
It was a very important tattoo to me as well. So I'm glad to be here on WoT You Feeling. After having that and finishing it up.
You're
That's
getting
awesome.
a lot of positives about your tattoo. Awesome.
Thanks, Matt Stagger. All right, you can carry on, Ryan. I've interrupted you like 3 times now.
Oh, no. Yeah. We could just jump into, where do we want to take this discussion first?
Well, it's funny because I think Master of the X just thrown out a bunch of things that I'm seeing as relating to like this topic of like social connection and social dynamics, and we're going to talk about in the White Tower, and we can wrap all that in. But like, I think the more I've been thinking about this topic and really looking forward to it, I'm like, we're also sort of like within our fandom too. So I think some of these, there's comparing and contrasting, like we're, I'm totally biased. I'm just going to own that, but we're a pretty damn cool fandom. And we do like have this excitement for each other and like this connection, and we hear all these things. And so I've been sitting here as I've been preparing for this show, thinking about like, wow, what is it about our fandom that creates these really strong connections that maybe we like don't see in the White Tower that causes like a fracture in the White Tower. And now I'm going to backtrack because just a reminder for everybody, this is a full spoilers show. So, in case you haven't read all of the books, know that we are going to be talking about things from all of the books.
That is a great reminder. Thank you for that, Miki. Yeah. So yeah, we have, my thoughts start off with, is Tar Valon doing it right? And if I was in charge of creating Tar Valon, would I have created different like structures? Would I have tried to steer it in a different? Is Tar Valon a product of the rules, or is Tar Valon a product of the people who inhabit it? Is the failings of Tar Valon the Aes Sedai who are maneuvering it, or is it implicit in how Tar Valon works that there's going to be this sort of like infighting, backstabbing, catty BS that you see that seems to like, if Tar Valon was functioning properly, this would have been like a 4-book series, but we had to like work out like so much BS because no one is like working together in like meaningful ways. Yeah, what do you guys think? Like, my first thoughts were, is this a product of the structure of the institution, or is this the people the institution is, like, garnering?
That's a great question. Well, yeah, because I'm like, so my first thought that comes from that is I would like to see Tar Valon 1,000 years beforehand, before Ishi got his hands on him. Because I mean, the other question, right, is like, what influence has the Black Aja had on the social dynamics within the White Tower? And, what types of dynamics have they normalized over time that maybe if it just was like, as you said, right, the rules, if people were kind of like living to the, like the spirit of the law, so to speak, behind kind of what was behind where Tar Valon came from, maybe it would be completely different. But we know we've got this kind of infectious subgroup within Tar Valon that is spread throughout all of the other subgroups in Tar Valon that that keep it from functioning well?
I think sometimes when I the first question that you asked about, does Tarvalin work? I think I ask myself another question, like what is the purpose of Tarvalin? When you think about what is the purpose of the White Tower die, and how has that changed or expanded over those thousands of years? When we get to the events of the book, I don't know. The White Tower really knows itself, what it's there for, other than to just survive, to perpetuate itself. It's the nation, and you get into the sticky bits of the social dynamics of something like a school, of like a military institution, or even a policing force, but also the social dynamics of politics, the politics of nations, right, and of the people that are working together to build that. So ask yourself about the social dynamics of the White House or the Kremlin or Parliament, as well as looking into something like, what are the social dynamics of a boarding school? What are the social dynamics of a police force? And all of those are happening at once, and that is insane. That's crazy. So all of these layers that are at work there, and I think in some ways, Tarvalon is remarkably successful as a nation, for one, to have survived the way that they did. As a policing force, not bad. I mean, men who can channel aren't running amok all over the place. As far as like a school goes, as far as fostering a sense of like empathy, for example, maybe not so much. But if you go by their own rules of what they're trying to do, and are they, the White Tower is very successful at creating Aes Sedai. Let's put it that way. But there are all of those other layers that we can talk about tonight in terms of the consequences of what it means to be an Aes Sedai and be part of the White Tower.
Right. And I would push back on just one point there, is that you said that they're successful at making Aes Sedai, but I would even say that over the years, they've actually, because of these ruptures and everything else that's happening, they've actually become less successful at even making Aes Sedai, right? There's kind of an elitism of how people come to become Aes Sedai, and it's, they don't necessarily go out seeking them any longer. They, you can't be a wilder, really. You have to be a certain age at a certain time, and it's preferable if you come seeking us rather than we seek you. And we see that later in the books really get challenged, and it kind of opens up the doors to like, oh, yeah, you become so insular and so closed that you are losing a lot of these people that could be Aes Sedai.
Miki, to that point, Joseph comes in timely with this point. The difference between the wise ones or the Windcallers is that they're involved in the daily lives of the people, whereas the Tarvalon seems far removed. Great point.
Yeah, excellent point. And I would say even the kin too, and the kin aren't even known to be channelers, but they are in the daily lives of people, and they intentionally go moving around, right? Like they don't stay in one place. They shift up their careers, they shift up who they, put themselves forward to be.
Yeah.
These are
I thought in my head, and now Kev. Yes, Kev. Yeah, that's a good point. Sort of the Aes Sedai is sort of embodying that snake eating its own tail, almost to the point where it's gone, right? They're cannibalizing themselves by refusing to bend or compromise. And it reminds me of what the question we asked about what was the White Tower like 1,000 years ago, before Ishamael and, the Black Aja were really, got in there to start driving these wedges in, without the Black Aja, would this have happened anyway?
Well, you gave us all those real life examples of institutions, and we can easily point out all those institutions that have very similar problems without known Black Aja within the Kremlin or police forces or boarding schools and stuff.
Depending
like that.
on who you ask. I mean, like we could there are all sorts of various conspiracies about those that kind of influence, for example, I
Gonna go
I've
full
had-
conspiracy. There's really
Right.
Black Aja among us.
right, you know,
Yeah.
it's like you're a dark friend. that whole conversation. But this particular topic about, you know, the Aes Sedai and, you know, the White Tower and whether it's a failed institution, I mean, I've always been pretty firmly on the side of yes, it is a failed institution. By the time, you know, we get to the end of, you know, the events of the book, my personal outlook for the White Tower in the absence of Egwene Aldir is that, you know, now that they have all of those other like aspects, like the world no longer needs to look to the White Tower as the only example of what a channeler can be. And you know, the last battle in the world is sort of like broken in and of itself again. And they were kind of weak, you know, at the start of it. So kind of a question mark to me. I don't think, that I just like veered off into a different direction. But point being, as far as an institution, it's complicated,
Well,
but
yeah. And it seems to have taken like an extraordinary character like Egwene to be able to almost very naturally be able to see the failings and make very quick corrections when she was put into power. Like, why are we sending these people away when they fail the test? Like, they're of use to us. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? She had this natural ability to look at things and say, well, what's wrong with this? She didn't seem controlled by like social pressures of her own upbringing in a way. And there's probably some sort of canonical reason why Egwene is so different, but it kind of brings me to this point with Christine Iman. She says, and why do we hold on to behavioral patterns and methods of interaction, power dynamics, when we don't understand why they are in place or where they originated from? So yeah, to that point, you know, I think we all kind of can suffer from the unexamined life. Like, you know, most people, I don't believe, really question their, you know, what's influencing them. So I think that would be even harder. Like, so just that level of like analysis of, of like what's behind our own behavior, being a part of like a broader social schema and power dynamic. I don't know how many people are necessarily even going to that level to try and understand their lives. I think most people are just trying to get by, have some laughs. But
I think, go ahead, Ryan, sorry.
But I mean, we all benefit from that level of thinking, though. I do believe it's important to question what is influencing us and what we are unquestioningly believing and what we are accepting into our like belief system. So I'm fully behind that. I just wonder what it takes to get more people to do that in a way.
Yeah, I think Miki had made some cool notes here about like that, the idea of social learning theory, you know, and the way that plays into what's going on in the White Tower. And with Christine's question, you know, why do you perpetuate these ideas, you know, even if you don't really know them? And, you know, why don't we interrogate them? Because it provides you an identity, you know, an Aes Sedai, especially this sort of venerated position. And, you know, looking, you know, as a novice, for example, going to the White Tower, not having any idea really what it means to be an Aes Sedai other than this almost mythical quality. This may be either idealized version of an Aes Sedai, perhaps somebody who's from Shinar, or it's almost terrifying version of an Aes Sedai, someone who, maybe someone from Amadisia, right? Both of those hold a kind of appeal, and then getting there and aspiring to become this thing. I was trying to think of a better than that, but, you know, this ideal, you know, of the Aes Sedai, you've latched on now. You've become part of. You're now pack, right? You're part of, and even if you maybe don't understand why certain things are, maybe you don't even like them. It's just sort of like, you know, it's now part of the deal to be a nice this. And I'm sure, shut up, Bobo. That's my cat. He wants me to feed him. ruining my thoughts here, but Miki can talk certainly with more nuance about this.
Well, yeah, thanks. Because what that pulls for me is this idea of the de-individuation. I always mispronounce this one.
De-individuation.
De-individuation.
De-individuation. Yeah. Yes, let's get all the syllables in there. De-individuation. But that's basically this concept of this idea that people lose their self-identity within a group, especially when there are strong belief systems within a group, or strong emotions within a group. So this is where like groupthink can happen, where people get carried away with a crowd and stuff. But even, that's like momentary de-individuation. But like, I think broadly speaking, when you're in an organization, like you're talking about, and I think so there's such good points too, especially when it's like a venerated organization or a group where there's this idea that you have to be a certain way. I think the members within it start to lose who they are at their core, and it's just little things, right? Like this is the stuff that we've all experienced it, right? We've been in a group, and it's like somebody in the group does something that we're like, oh, that's odd. I don't know why we're doing that thing that way, but nobody else is saying anything about it. But so I guess, okay, we do that little thing, and then there's another little thing, and there's another little thing, and next thing you know, there's a whole way of being that you just accept as is, and you're not questioning yourself, like Ryan said. And to that point, and coming back to Egwene, I would wonder, or I hypothesize, or if Egwene was maybe in my office, right, and talking about her experience in the tower, I might wonder with her about if maybe one of the reasons she didn't de-individuate within the tower is because she got pulled out of it so soon, right? And so she ended up being part of so many different organizations throughout her learning experience. So, she first meets Moraine, and Moraine's kind of introduces her to this idea of Aes Sedai. And then she goes to the tower. She starts to get indoctrinated into the tower, but then goes and the Sechin, like she becomes part of that organization unwillingly, and then is brought out of that and back into the tower. But then she's pulled out of that back into Tyr, and then goes to the Aiel.
Yeah,
exactly. And so she doesn't have, she isn't indoctrinated in the way that most Aes Sedai are. So she can question things. She can look at the system and go, "That's weird. Why do we kick people? That doesn't make sense that we kick them out. Why do we, have to make sure that people swear on the oath rod?"
And to become an Aes Sedai, you have to renounce your original identity. You are no longer who you were. So that mentality is almost like street gang mentality. There's so many similarities to my work with like disenfranchised, like my gang youths. I've noticed where they don't find meaning at home, so they go to this organization that has very specific things that they need to do to gain like different ranks in the organization, and they find a lot of meaning in that, more meaning in that than anything society can give them, because everything else is harder for like to accomplish and ambiguous, like but within the confines of this institution, like Tar Valon or like gang culture, there's an artificial like sense of accomplishment when you go into their systems and you accomplish within their like parameters, and then you take into effect also like add in this whole like removing your identity. That's a whole big thing where and I just wonder if is that like, do you think when we talk about Aes Sedai and Tar Valon 1,000 years ago, do you think that mandate was a part of it? Do you think that's always been like, what do you think, like where do they go wrong? Like I distinctly think, like when I'm trying to think like, why is Tar Valon such a messed up place, like, and what specifically are they doing to make it so? It feels like one would be like to create that like sense of like identity, or I guess de-individuation within the person, removing their identity from their family of origin, making them believe wholeheartedly in this institution that is grandiose and complicated. It seems all designed to break down the person and create like a loyal subjugate of something that you'd almost want people to go in there more free thinking and using their faculties better. Like if they're wielding the one power, you think you'd want maybe more creativity and like in how or if the fostering of that. Anyways, I'm getting it a little out of my wits, but like my question is, what do you guys think specifically Valon is doing that is like negative and could be corrected to create like a better institution? How about the mistress and novice? Do you think they should be spanking each other? Do you think grown women should spank each other? How about that? Let's start there.
Wow, I think the research has pretty definitively proven that corporal punishment is not an effective like way to
children
achieve like positive behavioral change.
I know.
And
but if it's grown adults,
for adults, I mean, it's a corporal punishment is designed to humiliate, and humiliation is, that no one likes to feel humiliated, at least not in a sexy way, like, and that's not what's happening. When we have this particular, even the other punishments, being birched, for example, like that's a kind of humiliation. You're brought into whatever the terminology that room, there's a word for it, the hall of something. Someone in chat, tell me what it is. I lost this question in trivia one time. But you're brought in there, you're brought before, all the Aes Sedai, you're birched, right? You're brought to tears and screaming because you've made some sort of transgression, or you go to the Mistress of Novices, and even if that was a private punishment, everybody knows you went there. So there's this, like, the idea of being an Aes Sedai is you're supposed to be poised, you're supposed to be unruffled. Nothing is to break that composure. And the idea of humiliation is to get someone to lose their composure, right? Is to make them look and feel less in front of other people, to discourage that behavior happening in the future. And it's like, I mean, the Aiel do the same thing. Shame is the worst possible thing that you can have in, under Jito. Reasons I think Aiel is kind of a toxic culture too, but that's beside the point. So it doesn't, to me, it feels like no matter how your culture that like once your humiliation is passed and your punishment is over, it's going to be forgotten. Do you ever really forget? Do people ever really forget that happened? And when you're motivated by fear not to do something, it also makes it very difficult to admit your mistakes. It makes it difficult to ask for help. If I'm working with a child who has perhaps injured themselves doing something they weren't supposed to, and then, a week later, child had an infection and now they need to go to the emergency room. What did I do that made that person, what did I do that made that child feel like they couldn't tell me that they had hurt themselves? Well, maybe the last time that they had been playing with, an unfriendly dog, I had screamed and yelled at them, right? And I hit them. Of course, they're not going to come and tell me that they got bit. That sort of thing, And I very much think that that's one of our failures of communication that happens amongst the Aes Sedai. They absolutely are not going to admit their mistakes to one another, especially not outside their Aja, because there isn't the punishment that you can expect is to be humiliated, which sucks. So no more corporal punishment, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so, and like everyone knows you've been to her because you just can't sit down. I think even Galad's like says to Egwene, I know you've been to the mistress because you haven't sat down for weeks. Like I think his Galad or Galwin talking to Egwene or Elaine was like, yeah, you've been like, she's been spanking the shit out of you. You can't even sit down. I've observed this. You might not see this, but yeah, Brother Dan and I have always like scoffed at like these silly, seemingly just weird ways that like the White Tower is using punishment. And I do love how very like directly, like Robert Jordan juxtaposes the IEL wise ones to the White Tower. Like that's very clear in the writing that he's doing that to create these, like, for us to be able to look at it and be critical also and make those comparisons, because Egwin was I think it was in the dream world, was watching like how certain like women who have no skill in the one power, these wise ones, have the most respect, whereas in the White Tower that is the exact opposite, is just like your hit points, like you're walking around with like hit points over your head like a fucking video game, and everyone's like, oh hey, I'm gonna acquiesce to this woman because she's stronger, quote unquote, her number above her head is stronger than mine, so I need to like let her make decisions regardless of whether or not she's motivated, selfishly, proven to be a team player, anything you want in a leader. You just say, oh, she's strong. I think, and there's several other examples of how it seems clear that the IEL are like doing it better in a way than the White Tower is doing it, in terms of like raising like powerful.
Yeah, the
right.
IEL, you know.
Well, I think both of those are examples of social learning theory, right? Because why do you do that? Like, you know, does anybody question that? But in this case, the deferring to someone who has higher strength than you, that's like an explicit understanding. I think we see that in New Spring when Moraine and Swan get raised, and they, you know, once they get into the Blue Aja, then they're like explicitly told, hey, this is how it goes. You know, you got to defer to someone who's stronger than you. And nobody says like, okay, but why? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Like, we're in an institution that is seemingly trying to make sure that
what a ripoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're trying to save the world, right? Like the White Tower is trying to save the world, and we learn that there are secrets within each Aja that they won't tell each Aja. Like there are skills and like magical like ability, like spells, like whatever, like different channels that they're not even teaching each other that could possibly save a life in battle, or you know, like I was shocked when I learned that. You know, I remember when I first reread that, like, oh my God, they're literally so craven. Like they're gonna hold back like, you know, powerful like abilities and like secrets just for, and I still don't even understand why necessarily they do that.
Well, it's the in-group thing, right? Like they want like they get attached to this idea of being part of something within something. It'd be sort of like if we as a fandom had to declare, once we got accepted into the Wheel of Time fandom, like, oh, okay, I'm a Twitter Time fandom person, or oh no, I'm a Discord fandom, or I'm a Facebook fandom, and then that was the only place that you could engage, the only place you could hear from one another, and you made sure you didn't tell, if you were on the Facebook fandom, you didn't tell the Twitter Time fandom things. Like, we would probably have a much more fractured fandom, right? Because there isn't that intergroup dialogue happening, and we see that happening in the Tower. We really see it like amp up at the later books, like as the Tower is actually fractured. But that's like the intention of the Black Aja. That is their plan of, we want it to become more and more insular, because we know when people become in these insular groups, we get this in-group versus out-group thinking that happens that just creates tension and friction.
I want to say hi to Jonathan R. in chat. He comes in as what he's calling, he says, I'm a White Tower defender. I love that. And he says, in the next stage, there has to be a Tarvalon, there has to be an institution, or else it's just going to be chaos. I think that's a great point. And I don't think we are anarchists here. I think we're educators and mental health professionals. We are not trying to abolish. You know, we're not storming the Capitol. We're not storming Tarvalon. We just want to like make some, you know, solid reforms.
Right. I mean, you know, in conversations that I've had about the White Tower and their, the role that the Aes Sedai in terms of, how they can expect to be treated, for example, Valon when they go to, when they go to Andor versus when they go to Tyr, or when they're in Shinar versus when they're in Amadisia, and these different sentiments and feelings towards the Aes Sedai, which is partially effect of, their insular nature that has happened. And in some places, it's very dangerous for them. It's dangerous to be an Aes Sedai. We certainly see the way that is being portrayed limitedly in the TV show. The White Cloaks are no longer Scooby-Doo villains; they're legit. Where an Aes Sedai can't set foot perhaps in Amadisia without fear of being, lynched. Whereas they go to Shinar somewhere and, they're treated, better than the king, right? So there are these wild different expectations that someone, that a channeler or an Aes Sedai specifically might have going out into the world. And having that in-group, that identity, that family almost that you have as an Aes Sedai, kind of makes it make sense the way that they cultivate that, the way that they cultivate that themselves, and even the mythos around who they are and what they are and how they have to behave, because it does provide protection. I've limitedly, because it's not a perfect analogy, but it is a comparison. I've compared the way that the Aes Sedai function to the blue wall of silence that you get, in the American police force. You don't criticize a sister in public. You don't interfere with how a sister treats her warder, that sort of thing. You have these awful things that are done by Aes Sedai, and you handle the matter internally, and no one gets to know. There's no justice for someone else, like the vileness, for example, right? Which drove a wedge between Tom Marilyn and Morghese. It had lasting effects, not just within the White Tower, but outside of it as well. That's something that they don't even talk about with people that didn't know about it, Aes Sedai who didn't know about it. But as far as everyone else in the world is concerned, right, it either happened and there's nothing you can do, or it didn't happen because you never heard about it. So it is when we get to the end of the Third Age, where we are approaching Tarmangaiden, and we even see the threat of the Shan-Chan, some of those negative behaviors that we see, or those negative aspects to what we do when they create Aes Sedai, have those things that are, like, for them, like, protective, sort of like in the sense of like a military, it's right camp, not a psychological experience, but in creating that sort of like brotherhood, there are circumstances under which it might, perhaps at the expense of something else, but we're weighing our options here.
Yeah, and I think part of what that's making me think of too is we're talking about this as if a lot of these social dynamics are inherently bad. And I think here we can draw another nice parallel between the message that Jordan was giving in the books, is that, there's potential for bad and good in all things. So having subgroups within an organization can actually be really helpful. I mean, think of states within a country, and counties within a state.
Unions within in corporations, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Ways
so,
to bend, yeah.
Right. Or even in classrooms, right? Like, how often in classrooms, do we start like kind of breaking kids up into groups, right? Because we know that sometimes it's just easier to have a smaller group to work with. We are social beings as human beings. And so there's a limit to how many people we can connect with at one time. And so sometimes having those smaller groups really does help us have that sense of belongingness and connection and stuff. And so the grouping itself isn't bad. It's that at times the way it gets used, or we've talked about this insular nature, when it gets really closed and starts really strongly getting that us versus them dynamic going on, that's where, bad things can happen.
So, Miki, do you want to go into some of the research that we were talking about within group, without group? Do you have any? I wonder if you could up this conversation with some theory here.
Well, yeah,
let's bring in that education.
It's not hard to look and find studies on within group, without group, and they've found consistently like so many natural tendencies of human beings to see so the idea within group, without group is that your within group is that who you identify with, who you're physically around on mostly, and it's mostly about your identity. And then the without group is either a group of people that have an identity that you find either just opposite of yours or just different, and the idea is that within your in group, we find our within group to be a heterogeneous group of individuals with many characteristics and motivations and backstories that we all understand. And the without group, we consistently see as a homogenous, like, be a blob of people who all kind of like act the same, and we don't understand. We think we can look at a without group and summarize them and summarize their motivations and summarize their whatever, just summarize them in our minds in ways that are convenient. And that is just a very natural tendency of humans being human. It's you'd have to actively work on your mind and actively work on your attitude to see yourself doing it and create like a mentality that fights against that. So social psychology has found this within group, without group phenomenon to be like, you can study it.
Yeah, if I'm thinking, okay, if we want to cite probably the most famous one, which is the Stanford prison study with Zimbardo's study, what that was I think it was in the mid-70s that they did it. Basically, they were curious about this concept of in-group versus out-group. So they asked students to volunteer for a study, and they were supposed to go for, I'm going to mess up the details because I don't remember the exact details, but it was like a weekend or something like that, or maybe it was a week. And they got randomly.
Yeah, I think it might have been a week. It was a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, they got randomly separated into groups. They were either prisoners or they were guards. And then they created a fake prison in the basement of this building. And what ended up happening, though, was shocking to the researchers, because the students fell into their roles so absolutely that they the people who were put in guard roles like became abusive towards the people who were put in prisoner roles, to the point where they ended the study early. Like it was actually becoming dangerous to the people.
People were traumatized. Yeah.
And everybody who was in there knew it was a study. They knew it was fake. They knew they weren't really prison guards. They knew they weren't really prisoners. But that's how quickly our brains, glob onto this idea of identity pieces of like, you are X group. And so if you were the prison guards, the rest of the prison guards, you could like see their actions. And as Ryan was saying, as that, oh, okay, I'll give them a pass and stuff. But the others, whoever the other is, or in this case, the prisoners, were seen as the homogenous group, the they out there that were dehumanized. And I think that's what we often see when we see these in-group, out-group dynamics playing out, is the dehumanization of other people that are seen as the other. And we see that in the Wheel of Time happening. I do think Jordan wrote that beautifully, especially as he jumps from perspectives, because you see that happening across perspectives. You see that happening when you're in the White Cloaks' heads and they're thinking of the Aes Sedai, and you see that when you're in the Aes Sedai heads and they're thinking about the White Cloaks.
Yeah, Brother Dan came from WoT, stayed for the Stanford prison subject. Yeah.
Yeah, like what an example of like what not to do in your, in your studies, right? Ethical nightmare.
Yeah, thank goodness we have ethical boards.
Hey,
now
that was,
keep us
I
from
mean,
doing studies like that.
I think that was the same around the same time. There's a professor in Berkeley going around in what he was calling the lobotomobile, and he would give you a frontal lobotomy right out of the back of his car. And he was a professor in Berkeley. Look that up. 70s
Wow.
was great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we could go back some of these other experiments too. I'm having that moment, right, where I'm like, oh, this is stuff that I talk about all the time, and now I'm freezing on the name of it. So if I start describing it, someone in the chat, maybe Christine, you can pull it up, or Dan, Kayla, if you remember.
Yeah, Christine's dropping some links in here. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah. So there's another one too, where the study was about shocking someone that you thought was another participant, and so the research would bring someone in, and they would say, okay, we need you to press this button if this person gets a question wrong. And when they pressed the button, the person who was supposedly getting questions wrong acted like they were shocked, but the person who was pressing the button didn't know that they were acting. They thought they were actually shocking another human being, and the researcher kept telling them, okay, cool, we'll turn it up a little bit. It needs to be a little bit stronger. And again, what this study showed is, and this is kind of the social dynamics of deferring to power.
Yep.
And that the people did it. They kept turning it up, even though the actor would be begging for mercy and saying, no, this is too much. Please make it stop. You see the videos. It's really kind of shocking. So
pun intended. Sorry.
All right. But points deducted.
When we see that, we see it again in the White Tower, right? Alida pushes it really hard, and in some ways breaks that, right? She holds onto her power too much, but we do see that deference to power constantly within the White Tower.
Good question, Christine. This is where the I just followed orders defense comes in. Do we just follow orders? Are power dynamics that powerful? I think science bears that out. Yes, she agrees. Yes, they are. Yeah, science bears it out that power dynamics are that strong. And people with the know-how, the wherewithal, and the know-how are able to get groups of people to do things that they would not otherwise have thought to do or felt that they were capable of doing. And that's one of the scary things about our humanity, but it's also one of the wonderful things about our humanity, because we could also on the flip side look at power systems and say, no, we could all egg win the shit out of our own lives and be like, is this appropriate for me? What can I change here? And we can look at what's being, impressed upon us also.
Yes.
All of these layers. Oh, go ahead, Miki.
Yes. My yes. And is, here's where the empathy piece comes in. And I know, Brian and I have had long conversations with the empathy. So I just want to make sure I'm making sure I'm putting an empathy piece out there too, of sometimes what we do is we judge other people really quickly when we see them deferring to authority, or not standing up to authority, and like, oh, well, if I was in that case, I totally wouldn't press the button and shock that person. And what these studies show us is that that's not necessarily the case. So yes, I mean, it is an intentional thing, and we all want to practice that ability to pause within us and check into like, what is pushing me towards the action that I'm doing? Is this in line with my personal values? Can I say no in this situation? But also, pause before you judge, because we don't know that we would not press the button in that situation. Bandura, absolutely. Thank you, Christine. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we could all end up becoming the mistress of novices in our own lives if we don't look out.
Well, all of these things that we've talked about, these layers of doctrination, these layers of expectation that are created from the time that you're a novice, or even before you even get to the White Tower, of these ideas that the Aes Sedai have put out into the world, the image they projected, are things that enable those sorts of abuses of power. The ones that we see from Elida or from the Red Aja or from, one Aes Sedai to another, or from an Aes Sedai to the Warder, or from an Aes Sedai to, one of those outgroup just, plebs out in the world, right? Elida, all of that, the culture of, like humiliation as punishment, deferring to someone who is a stronger channeler, deferring based on age, or the novices defer to the accepted, who defer to the Aes Sedai, who defer to the Amarlin seat, who eventually has to defer to the Hall of the Tower. Those sorts of things. There's room in there for all of those those kinds of abuses to happen when those power dynamics are in place without some sort of like we were looking at an ethics review board, right? Without some sort of those powers. And where are the checks on powers in the White Tower? I think someone brought up in the chat earlier that, one, you could look at some of the dynamics of the White Tower as grooming, and some of the behavior of some of the Aes Sedai or some of the accepted as things like sexual abuse. Elida certainly pushes that button. I believe it was with Maidani, one of the Aes Sedai who was
Yes.
given the oath of obedience on the oath rod when during the hunt for the Black Aja, which again is a sort of like, and then we get into even stickier territory. Once you do push back against those power dynamics and you break those rules, now it's sort of like, okay, but what now? Which was another a dynamic that we saw in the books, right? We have both the institution itself, which is vulnerable to abuses, and then what happens now when we try to reform those things, right? Because even if it was a flawed system, even if there were times where there were things that were people that were hurt by that system, it was still consistent, you might say. And then we see, with Salidar and the sort of chaos that was happening with that as well. So, yeah, layers upon layers upon layers.
Yeah, it's a good question. What happens when the system breaks, right? And people have, been holding on to structure, even if it's imperfect structure. They scramble to create structure again. That's just kind of the nature of human nature.
Yeah, and I think that we're coming to that consensus that we're not against it. We understand this is what people do. We group up. And we influence each other, and that's just the nature of humans. And like, if you are not within a group, there's so much research about how isolation causes mental illness. Like, just social isolation is either a symptom of an illness or can create some conditions. So it's in our very steeped in our nature to be connected and interacting with each other. And then so these groups, Robert Jordan was wonderfully able to capture how the dynamics of the groups affect the efficacy of the groups. One of the issues that I think is interesting, and I was thinking about this while we were talking, that is Robert Jordan doesn't ever get into family dynamics, really. He doesn't get into early childhood. We don't ever understand why Elida is such a bee, right? We don't know. She just is. And that's kind of I understand that he's already written 14 books. You can't get in everyone's story, but I always felt that was and maybe that is a failing of fantasy in general. Is I read fantasy and there's a lot of tropes about the baby that was just kind of found, or there's always reasons why we're not going to talk about the family of origin. Harry Potter is adopted and stuff. We never know.
Or the family's gone, right? The orphan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So the White Tower, he comes in and you have to absolve yourself from family, so that you just take that out of the picture. That's not influencing at all. None of these sisters are encouraged to look at their lives, and for better or for worse. I feel like it's for worse. For the reasons we're talking about, just the outcome is just horrifying. What they're doing to each other is horrifying. So it must not be working.
I do have empathy
Yeah,
for the Aes Sedai. You know, and Miki were talking about how like Swan and Moraine, they didn't understand how the power dynamics of the Aja worked until they had already joined it. You know, that was an expectation that they didn't understand. Think about someone like Daigyan, who spent so many years as a novice, as an accepted, and finally gets to the Shawl and finds out that, you know, because she's so weak in the power, you know, she's essentially relegated to a subservient role pretty much forever. You know, even as an Aes Sedai, within her own Aja, within the White Tower, she's, you know, as insignificant as you can be. And that almost any novice that comes through the White Tower and gets to the Shawl will be held above her, because of her, you know, her power, her ability to channel there. And I think it's a testament to the strength of the people that of the, you know, the women of the White Tower, that they're able to accomplish what they do in spite of social dynamics, in spite of the games that they have to play within the White Tower. We see some profound risk taking. We see some profound bravery from people like Moraine and Swan Sanche. You know, Swan Sanche put everything on the line, and she lost everything, you know, in upsetting all of these. You know, Lyanna as well, among other people in the White Tower, right? How many sisters? Varen, even Varen, you know, we look at and hold up as someone who went into the Black, knowing that she would have to do horrible things, you know, for the greater good. That very slippery slope of a phrase. Even within the Red Aja, someone like Pavara, right? Who, you know, who the very first time we meet her apologizes to her friend for the way that she had to act because she had just joined the Red. You know, can you forgive me? Like, that's the first time we really see a Red in the books at all, and it's in the 7th book of this series, display something that we can think of as humanity. You know, we have that psychology living in our heads of our idea. Here's our schema of the Red Aja. Here is what we think they are and what we know they are. And now, bam, here's Pavara, who joined the Red because her family was killed by Dark Friends, and she thought she would get a better deal with the Reds than she would with the Greens, basically. Who, you know, I absolutely adore Pavara. You know, I identify as a Red, by the way, you know, full disclosure here. So it's in spite of these social dynamics, we do see there are these people that are holding on to themselves, you know, and who are able to act with, you know, compassion and empathy and bravery, you know, despite perhaps being, you know, profoundly harmed by what the White Tower has had them do, you know, until we finally get to Nynaeve, who says "fuck this" right at the end, you know.
Right. Well, right. And actually, oh gosh, I just had a thought and then it disappeared. About pushing back and doing so much. I think it's the story arc thing, right? That's the thing that Jordan is so good at, is helping us see that there is growth that can happen despite the worst circumstances, despite the end of the world happening, but also despite being caught within dynamics that are challenging and imperfect. And we see a number of characters, I think, you know, Swan and Lyanna, that we see, you know, had the worst thing that could possibly happen to them. And again, that out-group thing there, that rejection, the social rejection thing, they are socially rejected. They get into Salidar and they're not recognized anymore. I mean, first literally, but then once they know who they are, they have to fight, even though they point out, like, I am the same person. Just because I cannot channel the one power anymore doesn't mean that I've lost all of my knowledge and awareness.
So Swan's like, use me.
Yeah.
Use me, which I just got this moment. But for her to be like, use me, I'm still useful. And that's probably true for everyone who's failed an accepted test, everyone who's chickened out, everyone who's been banished from the tower. Like, they're probably a lot of uses, and we find out later that they are. It's a big mistake for them to be doing that, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And there goes that arc, right? Again. So I think that's the message also within the stories, is that, you know, you can change. right? And you can push back against those social dynamics and grow through them.
Can you
Even
ever
when it
change
hurts.
Ajas? Is there anybody who's ever changed an Aja?
Liana was the first.
Liana's the first.
Yeah.
Jinx.
Okay. My guy. Okay, yeah. So she changed. Okay. What book
But
is
only
that in?
because
Damn
she
it.
got stilled first. I think that's not
Right. So
not a
Okay.
way that, they want to do
that
it.
whole process is discussed, I believe, in A Crown of Swords.
Okay.
That's the book that I'm currently reading. I'm taking a break from it because
Oof.
I need A Crown of Swords is real heavy reading, you guys. Like,
Yeah.
There's a lot that happens in that book, especially coming back to it after like about 3 years since my last reread. So having read A Crown of Swords, it's been like almost 3.5. Very steeped in fandom for the last 2 years, right? So all of these ideas in my head and talk these characters and read empathy. I did find myself through this read looking at White Tower, especially once the tower's in and we have these other dynamics of the Aes Sedai. You know, Cadsuane is introduced in A Crown of Swords, and we see the way that she,
Sweet. Jonathan R., thank you. I can't.
Yeah.
I'm imagining you're correct. I don't know this
Here's a
factoid.
question. I don't know that in the Age of Legends specifically that there were Ajas. I think the Ajas themselves were a creation of after the breaking, because we know that there were more than just the 7 Ajas at some point. I forget, and then those slowly condensed over the years. But in the Age of Legends,
all right.
itself,
Let's keep it civil, guys. Let's keep this disagreement civil.
Again, I am absolutely not the lore expert here. Someone else. I will defer to. Yeah. Anyway, Age of Legends was also a dystopia, and I'll die on that hill. Anyway, yes. The Aes Sedai, they're such complicated people. And you look at. Thank you. There we go. Mandarb agrees with me.
I can't see AOL and not think of old internet.
Right, AOL Online, right? And those old CDs we used to get in your mail, right? So
I don't think that there were Ajas, but I do think that there were like subgroups within the Aes Sedai, and that's where people would move between, right? Kind of like, that's not a good analogy. I was going to say between schools at a university, if you were, but actually, the way most universities work, you don't move between those. But you can.
No, it's more like it's more like frats.
Yeah.
Fraternities, like you.
Yeah, the Aes Sedai in the Age of Legends. I feel like we can the behavior of the White Tower and what they try to do with themselves is sort of like holding on to some mythical idea of what it meant to be an Aes Sedai. that is just inherent. Right, because once we get to see who were Aes Sedai, and the way that they sort of look at the Aes Sedai today, and they're like, wait, really? It's like 3,000 years of telephone, and it's something. It's just not what it used to be. But that doesn't mean that the Aes Sedai that in the Age of Legends didn't also have their own flaws. We don't know enough about them to get into that. But Lutheran was kind of a dick. Mirren was kind of a dick too.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, guys, I just want to before we move on, Miki, I just want to say thank you everyone for watching. This has been we're having a great time. We are going to end at 5:30, and the last bit will be our guided meditation. So stick around. Thank you for staying with us. I want to say hi to David Ravi. The best books are the ones with Tuan. May she live forever. I don't know if that's his thing, but you're killing me with your Tuan jokes. Maybe we'll have a Tuan episode and you'll just maybe not live through it. It might be too much for you. All right, moving on. All right, the discussion about Ajas in the... All right. All right, you guys are awesome. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going.
That's okay. No, what I was going to say was somebody in chat, and I can't remember who it was in chat, but somebody in chat earlier kind of alluded to like the core of the White Tower as we know it now, like so how it formed after the breaking. There is a fairly large seed of shame in there, maybe, and I don't know if shame's the right emotion. They probably would not accept that as much as the emotion, but that the breaking had happened, that there was the Aes Sedai were one. male and female. And so it was coming from this rupture, this fracture within who they were as Aes Sedai, and trying to pull that back together. So I think the White Tower as we know it now started and grew from this place of pain and damage. And so I think we can say that what we're seeing in this point, as we come to the last battle, all like grew from that pain. So I don't know where I was coming from that original point. I think we were talking about the Ajas beforehand and stuff, but there was something I was going to say about that. Oh, well.
I mean, the origin of the Aiel and the breaking of the world kind of, they go together. And the Aiel very much internalized that shame of failure as their culture, but became them, and then, in a way, so did the White Tower. Although it seems that they forgot more than the Aiel themselves did, which is, not really the Aiel had a whole ass ter'angreal that they can use to keep that ever present in their minds. Although, they certainly don't tell everyone about it. So, it's, the core of pain that's there is perhaps less profoundly present in the White Tower as we know it today, but it's certainly part of what built that institution, and makes them such hard, insular people.
Yeah. I think Dana Lou and Chad is pointing out, right, that they had to build this strong identity as a whole within and the subgroups, as a survival method in order to make it through all of that pain.
I was looking at our notes here, which is thinking about go ahead, Brian.
I mean, I think in terms of if we look at yes, that's a very good understanding that they've created this institution that is hardened and responding to a major world event. But I also think that okay, so that's why, and now we can move on. We understand, they're still creating incredible harm. It's an interesting thing to institutions. There's always a reason, and it's interesting. No one seems to be able to identify one thing that's interesting about this discussion. And I enjoy this discussion more than talking about power in terms of corporations or governments, because there's obvious bad actors who are profiting in major ways in the real world. And that's kind of the pursuit of power, is to find out who's profiting and move and kind of figure out what they're doing. But when we're talking about the White Tower, who's profiting in a way that it seems to be, just like Dan was saying, a natural response to world events, because you can't find individual actors who are influencing the tower because they want a manor, and power in this kingdom or this or that. It seems to be that that's not the discussion. Whereas when we're talking about real world power, it really is involving bad actors that we just need to identify and deal with, right? So I love how this discussion is more nuanced than just being mad at our bosses, right? In a way, right? But we are coming to the point where we need to move into reflections. This is where we kind of summarize our discussion and figure out what is our key takeaways that we want to impart. And have you been thinking about your reflections, Miki?
I'm always reflecting on the reflections, Ryan. It's just who I am. I have it goes on the fly.
I don't think I reflect. Sorry, don't you know this?
Well, I think but that's the whole reason we do this thing, right? That's why we started this this whole thing, was that it's really nice to be reflective of how the books can teach us a little something about ourselves.
Real quickly,
Yeah.
Master of the Deck, can you cover your cat licking herself?
I was just
we
gonna
might
say,
get
like,
the feed pulled. I don't know if that's like allowable on YouTube.
He was like chewing on his toes, and it was really cute. And then he went straight for the butthole. like thanks, Silchast. We appreciate you. Oh man.
Ah.
Man,
I think.
Yeah.
What now, Mickey?
Go on.
Well,
We
okay,
can laugh
so
and talk about these things at the same time.
exactly, that's what I'm saying, and actually, I'm going to say here too, like this
thank you.
parallel process that's happening, right? Of us talking about social dynamics and groups, and I think we're talking about the ways that some of the social dynamics are have been damaging to the White Tower. But at the same time, I'm watching chat go through and being like, oh yeah, oh there's Christine, oh there's all like the social groups that I am connected to, and seeing these names and these comments, and oh Kev, well, you said that thing, and there's Matt Steger, and like all of these names that like I want to call out because of the connectedness that I feel within the fandom and the community. And for me, that is really amplified like this week, especially about how connected I am feeling and how excited I am to be on this journey. It sort of feels like the opposite of Tarmangayan, where it's like, it's here, this thing we've been waiting for so long, but instead of going into battle and having to face Trollocs, we're like getting to go in and watch this show that we've been.
Yeah, we get to battle COVID and close in theaters.
Oh God.
You know, the first time I will risk it all for this show. I'm telling you, I would never do this for freaking any other movie or show. Oh, I'm loving. Hey, and actually, chat, please tell us your reflections. Thank you, Matt Stagger. I love this. Going along to get along, not always a good idea. Christine's reflection. Social groups serve a purpose and can become toxic when social in-group identity trumps the individuality of the group member. All right, and I think Dane Lou comes in. All institutions groups need reassessment and change periodically. Yes, Thomas Jefferson said the Constitution be every 200 years we should revolt or something.
No, it's from time to time something must be like the blood of tyrants, like freedom,
right.
like
Jonathan
the Garden of Freedom must be whatever.
Yeah.
I would
anyway.
If I was
it's a weirdly like patriotic quote there that gets misused and misattributed a bit.
No, Mandarb comes in with his reflection. Being a horse with horse blinders on, I'm sure this is why he's saying this.
Very relatable.
Mandarb, you're leaving your herd? What? No.
Oh, Mandarb. All right. For me, my takeaway is that it is up to the individual to, like how do I put this? My satisfaction in life, it comes from my ability to understand these things and understand why I choose the things I choose to do. I used to live in more like in an unobserved life. I guess for me, it's just like I'm going to go back to, I think of Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living, right? For me, that means I think about myself, but I also think about the world at large, and I think about how the world is trying to influence me. And my understanding and the knowledge I gained from learning about social psychology and learning about psychology in general has helped me be able to look at the world in such a way that I could see when a bad actor is trying to influence me, right? Like, so I'm more able to see when people are trying to use their knowledge of social dynamics, their knowledge of how people need each other. And I'm thinking about social media. I'm thinking about advertising. I'm thinking about politics. I'm thinking about ways people are trying to influence me to look at the things they want me to look at, choose the things they want me to choose, vote the way they want me to vote. I'm always questioning this because the science behind what they're doing is a science. And the more we understand that they are literally using the tools of psychology against us through psychological marketing, through market researching, through how do we message. I mean, it's so, to breaking it down, like everything. When you're looking at something on social media, like they understand that if they put a font in this color over here, you're statistically more likely to watch it for 0.3 seconds longer than you would have if it wasn't there. And that type of understanding, I think, helps me. I feel like I have more like individual freedom and expressing my free will in a world of psychological influences. And I think that my takeaway is that we all can benefit from this kind of work, and not just blindly, walk through life accepting our own thoughts. Like it's good to question our own thoughts, look at where they originate, and then question those around us who are trying to influence us. And I think that leads to, just better decision making. It's helped me in my own personal life. And I think we'd all benefit. So that's kind of my takeaway, is that power is something that people understand the limitations of our human heart, and they will use it against us. So knowing how they're doing it and what the tools they use I find to be very helpful.
Good stuff.
Kayla, do you have a takeaway?
I do. I think that fear, secrecy, and isolation are a profoundly damaging way to run an institution, and that it is very harmful to our ability to empathize with both each other and with in the in-group or out-group. And that is essentially what the Aes Sedai at the end of the Third Age are. That's what the White Tower is. It's an institution survives through fear, secrecy, and isolation. And in breaking the White Tower, we are breaking through those three things. And that I think that we can look at the perhaps untimely but also really necessary reformation of something like the White Tower is something where we can look at how do we break similar practices in our own lives? How do we break those similar practices, whether it's just something small, individual for ourselves, or maybe it's just something in our community, or maybe these larger institutions or parts of the way that the world around us runs, and how do we challenge those things? Am I in my own life, in my own classroom, am I relying too much on fear? Am I relying too much on secrecy? Is there that I can be more transparent with what I'm doing to make the people around me feel safe, to make them feel informed, to give them the informed consent in my interactions? And can I be a more inclusive person? Can I make myself less of an island, and can I help to foster as more like a community? Can I be not just me here in my house, but can I be more connected to my neighbors? Can I be more connected to my own family? Can I be more connected to you, Ryan, or to you, Miki, or to the people that are in the chat? What are things that I can do, as an individual, that might be able to push back on the ways that some of our institutions, even something as nebulous as social media, might be manipulating me into doing? Because fear and secrecy and isolation they hurt our ability to empathize. And I think that empathy is more important than ever, especially when we're interacting with each other online so much. There are 2 Wheel of Time conventions that are coming up this next year, and I don't want to have the experience of meeting someone in person and finding out that I have them blocked on Twitter because of something that they may have said or done. I don't want someone to meet me in person and to find out that I have been blocked for something that I said or did because I was operating from a place of fear, or from a place of secrecy, or from isolation.
Good points.
Excellent.
Actually, and it brings me to a point I wanted to make, is that at some point, we might, in our current lives, everyone who's watching, everybody's going to watch in the future, you in your own lives might now be in a place of power, or you might find yourself in a place of power. And that could be power over your own family. It could be power over your own classroom. You could be a middle manager. Maybe you manage Taco Bell. Maybe you're shift lead at Starbucks. That is a position of power. How are we using our humanity, using our understanding, learning what we learned through, the wheel of time, so that we don't become mistresses and novices in our own worlds where we're just carrying out like cruelties because we feel like that's just, par for the course. Joseph Barbaro says, reflection, Ace and I didn't experience families, neither their birth family nor raised their own, not engaging with others that fundamentally provided no balance to the institution becoming corrupted. I like that. And then Troy, Psych? I don't know. Reflection,
It's Golden Eyes
best
in
to...
Old Tongue.
Is it? No.
I just learned this from a
Old
relic
Tongue?
today. Sorry.
It's what in Old Tongue?
Golden Eyes.
Golden Eyes. Oh my goodness. All right. And then we do have he has a parent right there. All right. Reflection. Best to build in flexibility and reflection into your institutions rather than in strict fundamentalism. Institutions can find the middle way as well. Good call. Yes. Can a corporation follow the way of the leaf? It certainly can if its adherents are being led by a peaceful, empathetic soul. It is time, Miki. Are you ready? Guys,
Sure.
Thank you so
Always
much. We're wrapping up this discussion of the social dynamics of the White Tower, and we are going to move into our traditional guided meditation with Miki. And I have released one of our guided meditations as a standalone video. So if you so desire, it is there for you at any moment when you need it. And I'm going to be releasing all of the guided meditations, create a playlist. So if you need a peaceful moment, these are there for you. And I'm going to get the share screen going. What is this theme of this meditation, Miki?
This is the river. So today we are going to we've been at Valon, so we are going to be stepping down to the banks of the Aranin and enjoying some peaceful time together at the river. And do we have any background music, Ryan?
We do. You're not hearing it.
I'm not. I don't know if chat is hearing it.
This is all sorts of frustrating.
If we don't,
You know
it's
what?
fine.
Technology
My voice will
has
be enough.
been. Yeah, you have a great voice, Miki.
We could just actually listen to the sounds of this because it is a nice river sound. And you can't go wrong with that. So we'll get there soon. Hold on, guys. Boom, boom, boom. Share screen, center sound, and here we go. All right.
All right. So, breath in and a breath out. And wherever you are now, just want you to allow yourself to take just a few minutes with us to wind down. As I said, we've spent our day at Valon, and now we are stepping down to the banks of the River Aranin. We're taking this meditation as a time to just reflect on our being, our awareness, our consciousness. I want you to imagine right now that your consciousness, your awareness, is like the river. Taking a nice breath in, just hold a gentle awareness. Breathing out, being aware of what you sense around you. as if you are stepping into a beautifully warm river on a perfect summer day, immersing yourself into your awareness, becoming aware of the thoughts that are in your mind, the sensations that you may be feeling, both externally and internally, any emotions that are arising. Your consciousness is the river. The thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, these are simply just boats that are floating along the river. We do not fight the river. We do not try and force our awareness or the consciousness. We just allow ourselves to be in it. On your next breath, I'd like you to bring your awareness to one of those boats along the river. Whether that is a thought that is floating through your mind right now. Maybe it's a physical sensation, a twinge in a muscle, or awareness of your feet against the ground or your back against whatever is supporting you. Perhaps it's an awareness of emotion that may be rising for you right now. Whatever that is, allow yourself to climb aboard that. Become aware of it. Notice how the thought shifts and changes as it drifts along your consciousness. Notice that you might also be able to direct that thought, emotion, or sensation. You don't force it. It's as simple as just shifting an oar or a rudder. A thought may be uncomfortable or distressing. And in bringing our awareness to it, we might be able to notice a way we can shift that thought, adjust the way that it is floating through our consciousness. A physical sensation may be uncomfortable. And as we slowly bring our awareness to it, we may notice ways that we can shift that physical sensation. In each case, we want to do that gently and with awareness. Now I'd like you to allow yourself to just slip away from that thought or sensation off the boat, back into the warm river of consciousness. Allow yourself to just be with your breath in this moment, as if you're floating down the river. It is gentle. It is peaceful. With your next breath, allow your awareness to gently shift back into the space around you, perhaps bringing your attention back to the screen, becoming aware of what's going on outside, and allowing yourself to step outside again, just watching that river go by. Maybe setting an intention for yourself for the remainder of the week. And it's at this place we will leave our meditation for tonight, but do know that the river is always there. It is always waiting for you, and you can always step back in. So good night, and thank you all.